So today we're going to learn about the upcoming period in Jewish history, or period in the calendar. That is known as the 3 weeks. Beginning on Thursday, which is a fast day, the fast of the 17th of Tammuz, until the fast of the 9th of Av, which is 3 weeks later, it is a period of mourning amongst the Jewish people. We are mourning over the destruction of the temple. On the 17th day of Tammuz, the Romans surrounded the walls of Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem, and 3 weeks later, they broke through the walls and destroyed the Holy Temple on the 9th day of Av. So it is a very sad day in the Jewish calendar. Of course, the 9th of Av is the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. For this day, the first and second temple, many years apart, were destroyed. In fact, there were many other events that happened on the 9th of Av, other sad, destructive events that have lasting effects on the Jewish community till today, all happened on the 9th of Av. But leading up to the 9th of Av is 3 weeks earlier, which is this coming Thursday, the 17th of Tammuz, which is the day that the Romans surrounded the city of Jerusalem. Or, to be more precise, they actually broke through the walls of Jerusalem. And the 9th of Av, they actually destroyed the temple. They surrounded the walls a few months earlier on the 10th of Teves. And it was the 17th of Tammuz, they broke through the walls of Jerusalem, and eventually they went and destroyed the Holy Temple. So today I want to discuss a little bit about what does this mean, the temple? What does it mean that the Jews were dragged off to exile because we had our place, we had our Holy Temple, and now we don't have the Holy Temple anymore? And what does this all mean to us? And in order to understand what the temple means to us and what does it mean that we were in a state of redemption, we had a godliness in a revealed manner, and now we're in a state of godliness not being revealed, a state of exile. And this is really an analogous to, or an experience that we're experiencing similar to the experience of our souls. That our soul also goes through a journey, and the journey begins in one place and travels to another place. And that's what we're going to discuss today. The entire discourse we're going to learn today is in English, and was originally, of course, said in Yiddish, but now it's printed in English, and we're going to go through it to help us understand a little bit about what's going on. And basically begins to discuss the journey of the soul and the redemptive powers and how it could redeem the soul. It's important to point out that although we're talking about the journey of the soul, and even while the soul is in exile, we as human beings have the power to live a life of redemptive experience, and live a life of as if we are already in this state of spiritual holy bliss or holiness, where godliness is revealed. Because essentially, what is it that we're missing, that we wait for with the coming of Mashiach? And what we essentially want is God to be revealed. Now we know there's a God in the world. In fact, we feel God all the time. But the experience that we tap into when we relate to God is only a drop of what we really can tap into. And we want more of God. And so that's what we're going to discuss today. So let's jump right into it. And the mimer is called Tzion B'Mishpat Yipadeh B'Shaveha B'Tzedakah. And is based on the words of the book of Jeremiah, the book of Yeshayahu, where the verse tells us like this, that Tzion B'Mishpat Yipadeh B'Shaveha B'Tzedakah, Zion will be redeemed through judgment, and her captives through charity. So the verse requires explanation, for the term Zion here refers not to the city itself, but to the exiled inhabitants. The word Zion can mean a few things. It can refer to a place, the land of Israel. Sometimes it's referred to the city of Jerusalem. But sometimes the word Zion is referred to the people that inhabit the city of Jerusalem or the land of Israel. In this case, the Jewish people. So if this is the case, that's referring to not to the city, but to the people. Can't be talking about the city, because it can't be that the city will be redeemed through judgment. A city didn't do anything. The city is just bricks and stones. So it must be referring to the people. So if it's referring to the people, the question is like this. What then is the difference between Zion and her captives? We're talking about the same two people, the Jewish nation. So why is it referred to one part of the verse as Zion and the other part of the verse as captives? It's referring to both of the same people. And by one name of the people, Zion, it says that the way they're going to be redeemed is through judgment. And by the other name of the Jewish people, it says, calling them captives, they're going to be redeemed through charity. So will the Jewish people be redeemed through charity or through judgment? Which one? So this is the question. The first question is, why is it called them Zion and captives? This question can be resolved through the understanding of the concepts of exile and redemption. Exile is an unnatural spiritual state, one in which the soul is prevented from realizing its inherent potential. That's what exile means, that exile is in a place where a person is in a location where they cannot truly express themselves to the fullest. When someone goes into exile, if you think about it, what are they missing? They have their mind, they have their body, they may even have food, they have a house. So what's the problem? Why do we call it exile? Let's say if a head of state has to run, there's a coup, and they have to run away to another country. So the term that we use is they run away to exile. Why? Why is that term used? They have everything they need, and the reason is very simple. Because they cannot fulfill their fullest potential in this location. When we talk about the soul being in exile, we're referring to the same thing. The soul has a mission to fulfill. Soul wants to reach its ultimate and complete perfection or potential. So while it's in a state of exile, it cannot reach that place. The Maimon now continues. The soul's inherent potential can be understood through the explanation of the verse. So what then is the soul's potential that it's missing from the fact that it's in exile? And the answer is in this verse, Vahayu. The word Vahayu means in these words. What is this referring to? The words of the Torah. So the words of the Torah which I command you today shall be in your heart. What does this verse tell? What does this mean? Today means every day. Because every day the words of Torah should be regarded as new. And now the soul is in exile. It cannot study Torah the way it truly wants to, because it doesn't have the ability to tap into the depths of the wisdom that the Torah has. This concept is stated as a halachic directive in the Code of Jewish Law, indicating that it is relevant to every person, that everyone has the potential to tap into and to expand their soul to really reach their fullest potential with the words of the Torah. So the question now is, how can one reach such an appreciation? Doing so appears to run contrary to our natural tendencies. What does that mean? How is it possible for us to every day jump and delve into the words of the Torah and see the words of the Torah as if they are new for the first time? Since we live in a context of time, it would be seemingly impossible for us to continually relate to an event that occurred in the past as a present day happening. The Torah tells us that every day you wake up, you are to see the day as if this day never happened before. It is a new moment, a new experience. You're going through it for the very first time. If this is the case, no, it would be ideal if we can experience every moment of our life for the very first time. But the reality is, as human beings, we remember yesterday, we remember last week, we remember these experiences. So it's very hard for us to see it as if it's the first time. If it was the first time, we will love it, we'll appreciate every interaction we have with every person. Imagine you see somebody for the first time today, you'll be so excited to see them. Wow, so nice to meet such a beautiful person. It's only because we met them yesterday and we know what kind of rotten person that they are that we're not excited to see them. But if it was our first moment seeing them, we'll be very excited to see them. So if only we'll be on that level. But the reality is we're not on that level. So how could the Torah command us to experience the study of Torah for the first time every day as if it's the first time we're seeing it, when we have yesterday's memories? So this difficulty can be resolved by first clarifying the ultimate purpose of the descent of the soul from above, from the level on which they existed before the 6 days of creation. So we have to understand the journey of the soul. How does it work that our soul enters into our body? Where does it actually come from? So let's discuss this a little bit inside. The source of the soul is higher than that of all created beings, even those of the spiritual realms. This is evident from the fact that in the process of creation, the angels were created from the breath of God's mouth on the second day, according to some, and according to others on the fifth. As support for the second opinion, the phrase, the fowl that fly, is interpreted as referring to the archangel Michael. Although in practice, the angels are in a higher level of spirituality than the created beings of the material world, their superiority refers to their spiritual perception alone. There's no fundamental difference between the degree of their connection with God and that of the other created beings. Let's understand this for a second. When we look at the creation around us, we think to ourselves, okay, the sky looks to be a lot higher than we are. It must be much more spiritual than us. The heavens which are above us also must be much more spiritual than us. The angels which fly around wherever they live certainly are much more spiritual, much more holy than we are. We, after all, live here in this material, physical world. We live in a world that is tangible, that is coarse. We come in contact with things that seem opposite of holiness. And our soul is in our body in this world. So how can one even imagine that our soul, as the Mimer says, is on a very high spiritual level? It comes from a very high spiritual level. If it came from a high spiritual level, it would not be able to breathe. It'll suffocate in this crass, this horrible world. Yet, Hasidism, Judaism tells us that the soul comes from a very high place, even higher than the place of the angels. How's that possible? And so he begins to break it down. The angel was created, according to some opinions, on the fifth day of creation, according to other opinions, on the second day of creation. God breathed it, and it came to be. Okay? The soul, however, comes from a different place. The soul, let's see over here, the soul are drawn down from a higher level. The creation as a whole came into being through speech. The souls, by contrast, are drawn down from the levels of thought. How did God create the world? It says that God spoke and it came to be. God said, let there be light, and there was light. He said, let there be trees, grass, fowl, birds in the sky, and they came into being. But the soul of the human being was in God's thought. God didn't speak it. What is the difference between thought and speech? Thought is more personal, more inwards. Thought is much more connected with the human being than speech. Speech is more connected with an other person. We only speak so someone else can hear us. Thoughts are only for ourselves. We then take our thoughts and we verbalize it or articulate it for someone else through speech. But the speech part that is coming from our thought is only a minutiae drop of our thoughts. Our thoughts are so much more than what we're speaking. This is why it takes time for us to say the words that are in our thoughts, because we have to take all our expanded thoughts and put it down into a few words. So words are very limiting, but it's for someone else. Thought is very deep, very personal, but also very expansive. So if we want to understand who is the true person, is it your speech or is it your thought? Of course, the idea is that's in your head. The thought is more of you than your speech. Surely the speech is expressing what you're thinking. And we understand a person, we know a person through the words that they use, absolutely. But that is simply an extension of the person, an expression of the person, an outer expression of the person. The innermost part of the person is their thought. So if one would say, I want to tap into the essence of the human being, I want to tap into not your speech, certainly not your actions, but I want to tap into your thoughts. So something that comes from a thought is tapping into more depth of the person. Going back to our relationship with God, the angels of God, the angels that God created came from speech. God spoke and it came to be. The souls of the human beings, the souls of man, comes from God's thoughts, which is much deeper, much more intimate, a much more personal part of God. Therefore, it must be that the souls are higher than the angels. It is only how it's manifested down in this world that it seems to be lower. But in the truest, holiest, purest sense, the soul is actually much higher than the angels. And in fact, it makes perfect sense. As we've used this analogy many times, who can teach young children? Only a really smart person. The smarter the person is, the younger of children can that teacher teach. Many times we mistakenly think that a professor teaching an advanced course in college is much smarter than a kindergarten teacher. But the reality is that a kindergarten teacher has to take their vast knowledge and bring it down so a 5-year-old can understand it. That takes a lot more effort than standing in front of a class and just saying what's on your mind. Someone to take a deep concept, deep idea, and teach it to a 4th grader requires a tremendous amount of mental preparation and the ability to dissect the depth of the teaching and explain it to a 4th grader. That is a truly brilliant person, a brilliant teacher. A great professor that sits up and talks to his peers or people that have advanced knowledge, you can say whatever you want. Everyone's going to understand you, or they won't understand you, whatever. But you certainly have not brought it down to a low level. So a soul that comes down into this world, because distant world from the spiritual worlds of God requires a much higher level of spirituality. Therefore, the soul that we have in our world has to come from a much higher place, because if it came from a mediocre place, it couldn't come down to such a low place. It couldn't deal with the world that we live in. The only way it can deal with our world is because it comes from such a high place. There is a fundamental difference back into the Maimer now. So what happened? When God wanted to create the souls, the verse tells us that God consulted with the righteous, right? God said, let us make man. What does it mean, let us make man? Who is God talking to over here? So obviously, this does not refer to the consultation in the ordinary sense. God is obviously not consulting with anybody. Instead, the intent is that God saw the pleasure and satisfaction that he would derive from the divine service of the righteous, and hence brought the world into being. Now, this does not refer to the soul of righteous man alone, but rather includes every member of the Jewish people, as it is written, your nation all righteous. So all people are called righteous, all Jews are called righteous, and all of us were created with God consulting the soul. For the righteous deeds of every individual play a role in bringing God's intent in creation to fulfillment. So since the souls descend from such a lofty source, we must understand the purpose of their descent. Okay, very nice. So we've discussed until now that the spiritual soul of man indeed does come from a very high place, higher than that of the angels. So then we have the obvious question. Why the need for the soul to come down to this corrupt, perverted world? Let the soul remain up above. What is the purpose of the descent? For seemingly the descent into a material body in this material world creates challenges for the soul in its divine service. Now, if the soul, while it's in this world, does everything it's supposed to do and lives a life of holiness and spirituality, okay, maybe we then can understand the purpose of the soul's descent into the world. But the reality is that 80% of our time we're not spending on spiritual pursuits. And that's being kind. So if this is the case, then what then is being accomplished by the soul coming down to the world? The Maimer continues, it is explained that the descent of the soul into the body is for the purpose of the ascent. The nature of this ascent, however, requires explanation. Since the souls of the Jewish people arose in God's thought, to what higher level can they ascend as a result of the descent into the material world? Now, the Rebbe is asking, since souls exist on the level of God's thought, a rung that is by nature above the creation, what advantage can a descent into the material world, which came into being through speech, a lower level, bring them? There's a Hasidic melody, Hasidic song that describes this journey of the soul. And it goes like this. Haneshama yirades l'say chago. A soul descends into the body. Ach tzayek es vai vai. But it calls out, why? Yerida zot tzarech aliyah. This descent is for the ascent, and this makes it all worthwhile. So the soul comes down into the world. For what purpose? So the Shvi'ah and ascent, and as after the soul fulfills its mission in this world, even by simply doing one favor for another person, that can elevate the soul to a level that the soul cannot reach on its own before it came down to the world. But the obvious question is, we just finished saying that the soul of the human being comes from God's thought, and thought is the highest level within the person. So how much we can't go any higher? The soul's already coming from the highest place. So the descent is order for it to go higher. We're higher. There's no more room to go higher. We're already coming from the higher place. So what does it mean that the soul comes down to this world to go higher? Right? Good question. The Rebbe will now explain. The concept can be clarified by prefacing with the interpretation of the words recited in the morning blessing. Let's read the morning blessing for a second. Every morning we wake up and we say these words. Elehai, my God, the soul that you have placed within me is pure. You created it, you formed it, you have breathed it into me, and you preserve it within me. Ultimately, you will take it from me and restore it within me in the time to come. And we continue. As long as the soul is within me, I thankfully acknowledge you, God, my Lord, and Lord of my fathers, Master of all the words, Lord of the souls. Blessed are you, God, who restores souls to lifeless bodies. In the morning we wake up, God restores our soul to us into a lifeless body, a flesh and blood when we're going to sleep. So we wake up and we use these beautiful terms, referring to God, returning our soul. Pure, you created it, you formed it, you breathed it into me, and you preserve it within me. This is a beautiful prayer that we say to describe this thing that we have inside of us that we call a soul. Imagine, think about it. Wow, God is giving us this unbelievable gift every single day. God gives us, what is this soul that God is giving to us? So now let's go back to the Mimer and see what the Mimer tells us. The verse says, or the prayer says, the soul which you place within me is pure. This is the beginning of our daily prayers. The fact that this statement is made at the beginning of our daily prayers indicates that it reflects a theme of general relevance, as will be explained. The words of the blessing describe the soul's descent to this material plane and the elevated level that can be achieved through the descent. When do we say this prayer? Every single morning. Every day we acknowledge that the soul is coming back down into our body. Although in practice, this blessing is presently recited after the blessing of Asher Yatzar, it was originally intended to be the very first prayer recited upon awakening. The Talmud states, when a person awakes from sleep, he should say, my God, the soul which you place within me is pure. The intent of the term pure is that the soul derives from the level described as the sublime purity. What soul are we getting? We're not getting a corrupt soul, a dirty soul. We are getting a pure, beautiful, holy soul that is being entered into us every single morning. Afterwards, the soul descends. You see this? Afterwards, the soul descends as implied by the continuation of the blessing. You created it. Creation is already a stage after its original state. So the soul has no description at all. It's just pure. God creates it, makes it. Now there's something there. Right now it's just a blob. It has no forming. The next thing is God will form it. The first stage is creating it. Tzemach Tzedek explains, although the phrase you created it is included in the blessing recited every morning, it is not part of the text in the Talmud. It is, however, included in the text of the blessing found in the halachas of Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi. The term creation implies something brought into being from nothingness. Thus, the word of Bria, creation, refers to the realm in which entities begin feeling their own selfhood, the descent of such a realm, and certainly the subsequent descent represents a challenging transition for the soul. The soul is in a pure, unadulterated, unformed state, uncreated state. It is happy, it is blissful, has everything it needs. And now the soul has to come down to a body and be implanted into this physical thing. It needs to be created. So now we're following this journey of the soul from level to level, from place to place, as it comes down into our body. And then the descends further as the blessing continues. You blew it into me, referring to the enclosed of the soul within the body that it gives, to give it life. What does this all have to do with us? We'll see in a moment. The next step in the prayer is, and you preserve it within me, so that it will not depart from the body. The process of preserving the soul within the body refers to an encompassing light. What does this mean, an encompassing light? So there's different ways that God infuses the soul into us. One is on a surrounding element. One is on a more personal, individual, inner element. The Ramah explains that because the soul is spiritual and the body physical, there has to be a unique divine force transcending them both that maintains the connection between them. Think about the soul being a spiritual entity and the body being a physical entity. Why would the soul want to be engaged in a physical entity? Why would the soul want to interact with something that is physical? Not only why would it want to interact, it almost cannot. Think about an interaction that you may have with another person. You're interacting with the person, but after 2 minutes, you feel like you're not connecting. This person is whatever, somewhere else, and you're in another level. I don't know, think about, if you love music, and you're talking to someone about music, and that person has no concept of music at all. It's like after 30 seconds of the conversation, you kind of say, okay, have a nice day. You're just not, there's no connection between the two. The soul and the body have no connection. The soul is spiritual, the body is physical. The soul wants to constantly run away from the body. And the body feels it's being, some foreign object is filling it up. It doesn't want it either. It tries to push it out. So therefore, God in his infinite kindness, what does God do? God forces these two to live together. Or what does it mean God forces it? There's an outside force, an outside power, an outside light that shines, that allows the body and the soul to learn how to live in a cohesive environment. And you know what happens after that? The body begins to understand the soul's mission, and the soul begins to appreciate what the body can accomplish and assist it in its mission, and they begin to live together happily. But at first, there's that friction. Have you ever tried to wake up in the morning and jump out of bed? Doesn't work. Why not? Why did you wake up in the morning and jump out of bed? Why do you want to sleep for a little bit more? It is precisely for this reason, because the soul wants to come into the body and the body's rejecting the soul. The body says, soul, I'm not ready for you. Let me sleep a little bit more. The soul says, what do you mean? It's morning. We got to get up. We have so much to accomplish. Have you ever tried to go back to sleep? Is it a comfortable sleep in the morning? You wake up and you want to sleep nicely. Usually it's you're tossing and turning, because that is when your body and your soul are battling. The soul wants to enter the body and kick you out of bed. The body wants to reject the soul and throw you off the cliff. And it's going back and forth, back and forth. So finally the soul says, okay, body, you know what? I'll give you 10 more minutes. You can hit the snooze button. And the body tells the soul, if you give me 10 minutes, I promise you, I won't hit snooze again. and I'll jump out of bed right after that. That's what happens. We all go through that battle. The battle that we are going through waking up in the morning is precisely what is an expression of our body and our soul battling between the two. That's what's happening. So God, in his infinite kindness, imposes upon us this encompassing light, this infinite light that allows us to live a life where our soul and our body come together. This level, so instead, right now, here, we're paragraph beginning, instead, the intent is that the light fills every place and corner, causing vitality to be enclosed within the created being, and at the same time encompassing it on a higher plane, preserving it so that the life energy will not cease and depart. So what happens once the soul comes into the body? The soul has the potential of being swallowed up by the materialistic parts of the body. The body gets up and it doesn't immediately tackle the day. Luckily, we've trained the body as soon as it wakes up to begin to say the prayer, Moda Ani, thanking God for returning the soul. But then the body says, whoa, I'm not ready yet. I got to brush my teeth. I got to go to the restroom. I got to get dressed. I got to eat breakfast, make my coffee. Then we'll go out and pray and study and help out other people. But by this point already, the body and the soul are beginning to learn how to live with each other and complement each other. Each recognize that they have a quality that the other one doesn't have, and they need each other in order to each fulfill their fullest potential on this particular day. So thus, every entity in the world is maintained by two types of divine light. A level of light that encloses itself in the entity and endows it with the unique nature it possesses, light called Mamalik Kalaman, filling the earth, filling the world, and a level of light that transcends the entity and yet is found within it, a light called Sovic Kalaman. A parallel of this concept exists within the human body. There are particular powers that enclose themselves in each limb or organ. For example, the power of movement in the hands and feet, the power of sight in the eyes, the power of thought in the brain. Above these particular powers, however, there's a general life force that encloses itself in every limb and organ without discrimination. We wouldn't want the power of sight to go into our hands, or the power of might to go into our ears. We want each power to be attributed to the limb that it needs. But we also have a similar power. Now let's continue. Behold, the blessing continues. So this is all part of the blessing that we've said. Let's read it again. My soul that you have placed within me is pure. You created it. You formed it. So the first stage is you created it. That's what we spoke about until now. The soul that you placed in me, you created. We're now going to analyze the next part. You formed it. What does that mean? You formed it? Sorry. We're going to the next part here, where it says, as long as the soul is within me, I thankfully acknowledge you, God Almighty, my Lord, the Lord of my fathers. So the blessing continues, as long as the soul is within me, I acknowledge you. The Hebrew term for modeh can also refer to giving thanks. And that is the meaning within the context of the blessing. Nevertheless, the interpretation mentioned the Maimon, i.e. acknowledge, is also within the scope of the term's literal meaning. Because the mere fact that the soul is present in the body, everyone can acknowledge God. Who acknowledges God? Who is aware that God is the one that placed the soul within me? It is the body and the soul together. The words of the blessing, as long as the soul is within me, I acknowledge you, imply that the acknowledgement of God is a natural consequence of the soul being within me, because every soul is an actual part of God. Everyone, even a person who is underdeveloped, spiritually has the potential to acknowledge God. Afterwards, however, one must come to the level of blessed are you, God, which is the higher plane of acknowledgement, as Alter Rebbe proceeds to explain, the service of acknowledgement. Hodah, thus, does not cause the level of godliness to which the person relates to be revealed within his thought process. Blessing, bracha, is high. The higher level mentioned denotes drawing down and revealing godly energy within the soul and the world at large. In short, what have we tried to accomplish today? We tried to understand precisely what is the role that we have in our world that we live in. Recognizing that the role that we have is not just the role to feed our body, but it's a role also to nourish our soul. But in order to appreciate the depth of the soul, it is necessary for us to understand where the soul comes from. Because once we understand now that the soul comes from the thought of God, which is the highest level, it makes it even more perplexing. How can the soul come down into this lowly world? But when we think about it, we actually come to one simple conclusion, and that is, thank you, God, for giving me that soul. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tap into such a lofty spiritual level and allow the spiritual level to infuse my physical body and elevate it to a high level. However, you also are allowing me to see my material self, my living existence in this world, not as something foreign to God, but as a mission or as a ability to fulfill the purpose of God. So my body actually is on the same level as the soul in a way, because the soul cannot fulfill its mission without the body, and the body is needed for it. So in a way, we're equal partners. And if we're equal partners, then when our body and our soul together fulfill the will of God by studying His words, we actually do attain an ascent. We go higher than the place where we originally came from. And that's what we're going to discuss next week. And we're going to tie it into the discourse that we're talking about with the Maimer Tzio Mishrat Padre, referring to the 3 weeks of time that God will redeem the captives, or we redeem the captives, and Zion will be redeemed through judgment, and the captives will be redeemed through charity, meaning to say, through our actions, we will attain a level of spiritual height and connection with God, which will be with the rebuilding of the temple and experiencing God in the city of Jerusalem, with godliness being revealed. With that, we finish today's lesson, and thank you for coming.
Bye, Rabbi.
Right, a little less people than last week, but that's okay. We certainly, not about the number, it's about the depth and the concept that we learned. So thank you very much.
Sure.
Right. Have a good week.
You too. Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Have a good